Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our new podcast. My name is Tomislav Jarmić, and together with my co-host Anna Maria Matoc, we'll be conducting today's interview. Our guest today is one of the pioneer consultant designers who's been working for the automotive giants for the past 30 years, with the biggest input on BMW Z3, Audi TT, and a variety of motorbikes in his portfolio. His most recent work include the one on BMW M6 GT3 race car, BMW Zinoro Brilliance Zinoro, and a mini e-scooter. More about all of this, we'll hear from the man, the legend himself, Martin Longmore. Martin, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you very much, Tom. Nice to meet you, and Anna Maria here.
Welcome, and good to have you here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Thank you,
sir. So, before we begin, would you say a few words about yourself so that people know who they are speaking to, who is today, and who is Martin Longmore with us?
Well, I'm, as you mentioned earlier, a car designer, motorcycle designer, with quite a long career by now, since over 30 years actually. Yeah. And now I've moved over to live in Croatia, and this is beginning a new adventure.
Yeah. So how did you, where did the spark start from for the designing of automotive things? How did it start? Where did you start?
It's a question I sometimes have to think myself, and then to understand how the road of life takes you. It's not always how you think or predict. And in my case, as a small child, I always had this fascination with racing cars and speed. And I can't really explain from where that came. It was just something within me. And some of my earliest memories are, for example, the Dutch Grand Prix of 1964. And there was a Scottish driver called Jim Clark, who was a world champion. And I still remember that this had an influence on me that made me want to do that, or added to that inspiration. So that was probably my earliest memories of that type of thing. And I guess I type of steered my life in that direction, or I had that desire, and things seemed to happen that made it work.
According to it, yeah.
And I can't really explain it. It's when I look back now from today, if I look back to that time, it's almost like you think it, dream it, and it starts to happen.
The power of manifest.
Yeah, manifestation.
It's almost like listening to myself, except, I didn't grow up next to a racetrack, but my grandpa was always taking me to some car shows when they were still in Croatia and things like that. But
and I was quite fortunate that I'm from a small Scottish village called Longmore. It's very rural. It's exactly like around here. And I didn't have the benefit of large cities or the cosmopolitan lifestyle. It was all very much, you made do with what you had. And if I think about, for example, to be racing for me was with my old bicycle and trying to go as fast as we could around the village, you know, at that initial stage. And then quite often crashing and knocking myself out. I can remember there was one week I knocked myself out 3 times.
I think every petrol head has a story like that.
Right, and as my childhood developed, so from that, just as an amusing story perhaps for you, was that I wanted to have a crash helmet so I wouldn't hurt my head. But my parents didn't want their son cycling around the village with a motorcycle crash helmet. And so, believe it or not, and them knowing my racing interest, I was given a go-kart at the Christmas time. So I was 10 years old by that point. And all my desires and dreams of start to go racing, I suppose, accelerated a bit after that. My father was a general practitioner, family doctor, and he actually didn't know much about anything to do with mechanics. He didn't know a screwdriver from a spanner. but he supported and my mother supported my interest. And from that, it was a type of progression. What I thought was, in order to go racing further down the line, which was very expensive then, I would have to, or I had this childhood idea that, well, if I design a racing car, I'll be able to race it. And so I started at the same time drawing and sketching out my own racing cars. And I'm maybe fortunate in that, for example, you've seen this earlier portfolio. When I was younger, I also realized I have a talent for drawing and sketching, and was able to put these two things together, which was quite convenient. And that allowed me to develop and have, in a sense, two careers initially. One, if the racing didn't work out, because it was very difficult at that time, and yes, as you've mentioned, probably still is, with finances and all the rest of it, then I had something to fall back onto. And of course, an amusing side of that was that my father, being medical, couldn't understand how anybody could earn a living from drawing or sketching or designing. That just wasn't in his thinking. Whereas I had a lot of encouragement from my mother, because she had that idea that you can, or in fact was sort of in our family that can happen. So I was encouraged to do that.
Having at least one supportive parent is crucial. In my case, I really didn't have any kind of support, because I was also always attracted to motorsport and automotive. And when I decided to leave Croatia to seek like this product management, design jobs, and ended up in Kiska, which you know very well, I really didn't have any support from anyone. Right. So that's good. Yeah. But I've seen many designers come to Kiska, junior designers or interns, and this is where it starts to be interesting. What was your first company that you worked for after the university? Because,
okay, so first I went to study at the Newcastle Polytechnic, and I studied industrial design, and that was a 4-year BA course, BA honours. And in industrial design then I learned the basics, or the fundamentals of designing and presentation, and from a point of view of a more deeper understanding of how things should be put together. So it wasn't just about making pretty pictures, as we say. There was a depth that I learned from the industrial design aspect. But of course my main interest even then was just designing cars. And what I found then was that there was a course in London called Automotive Design course at the Royal College of Art. And I had to submit a portfolio to the Royal College of Art. And on the application, you could put down, if you were not already associated with a car company, you could put down, there was a number of names, which would you agree to be, if you were accepted, agree to be sponsored by? And I put down Ford. Then it turned out I was accepted to the Royal College of Art, and on the basis of my portfolio, and Ford agreed to sponsor me. So then I had the 2 years, and the sponsored students at Royal College of Art had actually rather a comfortable life, because your expenses were covered, and a lot of the other students unfortunately weren't.
Is there a reason that you put Ford?
The idea at that time was, I thought Ford was the most stable company, and it had also motorsport connection. And they'd sponsored other race people, and it happened that one of my friends was also Ford sponsored, and I thought, when it goes so well with him, then it makes sense. That was the basis of that move. On the side with Ford, it wasn't that they were particularly adventurous with their car designs. Really, they were in a transition period, and it just seemed like the right thing to do for me at that time.
I call Ford the last man standing because today, compared to what it was, the industry, the design industry, not only that they have sticked to their fundamentals and brand promise, but they're still the only one that are producing the V8, and they said they will never wipe it out. So I'm not a big fan of Ford, but I have massive respect for what the management does in that company. So it's very good to still have them around.
Well, at that time, they were also very encouraging of bringing through young designers. And what I was going to say, Phil, that was interesting was that the designers that were accepted each year to the Royal College of Art, again, I'm coming from the countryside. I had no idea of how things really worked. And what I found out was, at the end, there was only 2 designers that had to submit portfolios and be independently selected. All the other guys in my course were already pushed in by the company. So the company was paying the Royal College to educate them. But they didn't have to submit portfolios and expose themselves to, will I be accepted or not? They were just put in.
You took a bigger risk, let's say.
Well, let's say I had to sweat to get in. And I can remember making so many, like these A3 sketch pads that I submitted. I almost took a box of work to convince them that I was good enough to be a Royal College of Art student.
But this is why your work was so big in quality, because you actually had to put in sweat and tears into making something to be accepted there, right?
I think so. I think so. There's no substitute for work. There's no shortcut. And that's what I think is maybe to some extent lacking a little bit today. Everybody thinks it's handed to you on a plate, or I can draw cars, or I can draw bikes. It's not like that at all.
It's not the case. I'm coming from a product management. I've been in 3 companies, and from product management side, I was working with designers, and I was heavily involved in design. And this is one of my questions: when did it change? How did it change? What happened to the industry? Because basically, we had designers, some good, some bad, some worse, that were literally just copying designs, changing a little bit here and there. I'm not saying that's the good way to do it or the bad way to go, but literally copying something that used to was, and just like slamming fashion over function philosophy. It just doesn't work on today's geometry of the bikes, for example, because I was in the motorcycle industry. So how do you see this industry today? Does it,
well, I think
is it emotional?
I think what's changed is that in the past you tried to be original, and you sketched out your original drawings, and you brought your own type of characteristic or personality,
Passion.
which was in your. I can't really explain other than it's in your hand. You know, it's the lines that you draw, and you'll have a certain
way to it that is uniquely yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in order to be distinguished from your other competing designers, or artists, however you like to see it, you have to bring your own style and your own characteristic, because at the end, that's what makes your design or your artwork special.
Yeah.
And I think what's happening now is because of one, it's to do with the technology and the digital world. It's taken away a lot of what can be expressed
Emotion.
with just a pen and a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds a little bit cliched, and everyone says, well, you need to... But fundamentally, that's the whole essence of what makes a design or an artwork special and recognizable. And so I can remember that even starting from Royal College time, for example, and then coming up through the studios, the guys that made the memorable sketch work and ideas and artwork, they were the ones that got the projects. And so you had to really express your own individuality very strongly to be noticeable, because otherwise you're with the sheep.
You would drown.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know,
exactly.
and I want to be the ram. I'm not the sheep.
Yeah.
If you know that analogy.
If you can't dodge it, ram it.
Does it do
But I experienced. I mean, in the last years, unfortunately, it was the vice versa. Good designers were put on the side, and the really bad ones that I never liked or appreciated, they were, brought to the surface, and they were being like worshipped by the management. But that's also an interesting point, because some of the people in the management, they don't really come from this petrol-headed side of the things, and they really, they don't have the actual passion for it like we do. So that's an interesting topic, how people get pushed through. They make a name out of themselves, and they literally have absolutely no background whatsoever, or passion or emotion behind it. And you can see that in the designs. KTM.
So anyway, and that was, I suppose, from that point of view, the desire to always try and be creative and bring some originality to work. Now, you are influenced, it's inevitable, you're influenced by all the things round about, and that's reflected to some extent in the work you produce, or in terms of which project it is you're asked to design. Then there will be there'll be several pointers that you have to consider: the market, the tastes, the age group, the type of vehicle, the costs, the time, how far in front you're designing. Because don't forget, normally you're designing probably 5 years ahead, because it takes normally 2 to 3 years to get from the sketch idea to the final product. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think it's instant. It is less time, it does take less time today through all the different advantages that some of the new technology brings, but fundamentally that's the sort of time span you're thinking. So when you were sitting down to design, you have to be looking at what's the tastes, or anticipating, because you can't really predict accurately what's going to happen. Who can in life? Nobody can know.
Yeah.
But you try and take the influences of that moment and project in your mind what it can be, or what it could be like further down the line.
Oh, that makes sense why your work looks so futuristic, because you're thinking so far ahead to make it.
Well, I think there is. Thanks for saying that. I think there is an element of fantasy that must be brought in. Sometimes it's like I said earlier. If you can think, if you dream it and think it, you can make it. And more or less, it is like that. And there are moments that you can, or a design should be able to influence and move move people in a certain direction. And that should be beneficial for everybody.
There should be a wow factor even for the people who are not into it. For example, like you, there has to be a moment when you see a car or a motorcycle, and then you stop and then you really wonder, wow, this is what I really like.
Yeah.
This is a nice design, or it's a nice looking thing. What is it? Not often I had that, unfortunately, because not only you have to think futuristic, you have to have a good team. And from a strategic point, when you work in a product management with designers, with good designers, you have to be aware that not all of them have the same intentions like you do. That's very challenging. And then when it's challenging, sometimes it can be good or bad. Then if it's bad, then you can definitely see it and feel it later in the design, in the actual launch of the model, when it's brought up, when it's in front of you. And I have an example, for example, of the 1290 Super Duke. Every time I see that thing in my garage, I remember all of the bad points that we had, like sweat and tears and really the bad intentions behind the model. Because not everyone was on the same page. Not everyone wanted to improve things and make the thing better. And yeah, it's not some kind of a special model. Unlike the RSV, I want to come back to that, because this was one of my, and it still is one of the most favorite bikes, the most lovely bikes out there. And when I first met you in 2016, I didn't know that you designed it, because I was still fresh and very green in the industry. And then when Renault told me that you designed it, and when we went to the flat track with Marco Belli, I was like, "What? Really? Exactly, yeah. And I was dying by 12. And Martin, Renault was like, but Martin, he's 60. And I was like, what? I'm 25, and the guy is pushing it, and this was so fun. I was so amazed that I could ride with the legend like you are. This was really nice. But I want to talk about the RSV a little bit, because it's one of the iconic models, most iconic models out there. How did that came about? Is there a sleepless night or something that you envisioned the model, or how did it happen?
If there's a sleepless night, there probably was several.
Insomnia.
There probably was several once the project was running. How it came about, my connection with the Aprilia, is quite interesting, because I was actually designing a motorcycle with BMW. In fact, I went to BMW, or was asked to come to BMW motorcycle to design a car in 1989. And it was a top secret project. And it was very interesting because it was so top secret that the internal politics, no one was allowed to know that the motorcycle group had brought a car designer to design a car
Blasphemy.
For the motorcycle group. And what happened then was that this car was made to model, and in the time, because actually my model was winning the presentations, then they put the project on hold. It was an internal political aspect, because BMW AG couldn't have BMW motorcycle out designing their own car guys. And in that time, the head of Motorrad asked me if I could design motorcycles. And I'd had a type of interest, but I hadn't sat down and designed motorbikes at that time. I made some sketches, but it wasn't in that, these are going to be produced. These were just for, how would you call it, futuristic renderings and things like that. But I said, yes, no, I'll have a go. And that put me onto the project of BMW 650 Funduro. And this bike was, they took my design. It was to be based on the Aprilia, 650. And the name of that Pegaso, the Aprilia Pegaso. And what BMW were looking for then was what they called an Einsteiger machine. They were worried that their products were too expensive for most people starting motorcycling, and that their sales were dropping down quite badly. And they thought, we have a way to bring in a lower cost quality motorcycle. What would be good? We'll do a collaboration with Aprilia, so that they already had a basis bike. They didn't have to reinvest in a complete new engine. And this was the initial idea. And I made that project designing in Munich and being flown down to Noale near Venice. And we made the model down in Noale, and it was made with the Italian technicians and modelers and engineers as well. And it was interesting from the point of view that I was the English guy between Germans speaking English to Italians understanding English. And I was the one in the middle that actually, whose native language is English. So the amusing part would be that I would get back from the studio in Italy back up to Munich for the Monday to have the discussion how it was the week before. Martin, everything's great, it's so good, the Italian guys are going to be doing this. What? No, they're not. What do you mean? No, they've understood that you want them to do that. No. Back on the aeroplane, back down to Italy. So Martin, everything's good with Munich. No, but they told us to do this. No, they want you to do that. And it was just through the misunderstanding
Lost in
of
translation.
each other's mistranslation.
I wanted to
Anyway,
say,
I shortcutted a lot of the main problems there. Okay, so it's a long way to come to the RSV, but what happened then was this BMW 650, and they called it the Funduro, it became BMW's top-selling bike. And in 5 years, they sold 67,000. In the first year alone, they'd planned for 5,000 to 6,000, and they had double the orders. They had to increase the production. They couldn't meet. They couldn't meet the targets. And that was a very good calling card for me from the point of view of motorcycle design. And then, as I was, I'm going to jump forward a little bit here. From BMW, then I went to Audi, and it was as I finished with Audi that I get a call from Aprilia.
how long were you in BMW?
In BMW, I was from '89 until 92.
Okay.
End of '92. That first time. I went a second time, but that was much later.
I was one.
So that was
were
the
not even
first. And then I was at Audi from '93 to '95. And then I get the call from or was it '96? I get the call sometime '96. Martin, could you come and have a meeting with us? And it was the president of Aprilia, Vano Beggio. Mr. Beggio is so impressed by what you did for BMW. Can you design some great selling bike for Aprilia? And this was a great thing for me, and it also brought me now then more down into Italy. And of course, with the Italian car design, that was always a huge inspiration for me and for most design people. And just the way that Italians go about design and style, and you know, everything's so great on the surface of it. And with the interesting part was that they were very reluctant at the beginning. The order came from president, Ivano Beđija, his design guys were not too
Convinced.
Happy that there was an outside designer being brought into their little clique to design it. So at the beginning, I was actually given some really funny projects. Little scooter. There was a little scooter which became the Spice Girls scooter. I don't know if you know about this. But it
the
was,
little wheelie thing.
but they called it the Spice scooter, and there's a very, let's say, I think it was almost like they wanted to test me out. Can I make? Let's give them a scooter, small scooter to design, see what we can do with that before they might give me something else, you know. And maybe it was a way to appease their own design guys, you know, that they weren't too discontented. Anyway, the funny thing with this scooter, mini scooter, 50 cubic, it became the #1 selling scooter in Spain for teenage girls.
Perfect.
And an even funnier aspect of that, which you may or may not know about, Aprilia had signed a deal with the Spice Girls, and the Spice Girls were going to promote the scooter, and that's why it was called the Sonic Spice. In that process of when they signed the deal, they signed the deal knowing that they were going to split up. So they'd sold themselves to Aprilia. Aprilia had paid for the privilege of having the Spice Girls endorse their scooter. And then suddenly the Spice Girls are splitting up. Spice Girls took Aprilia to court, claiming that we didn't get the scooters that we were promised and the payment. And they went to the High Court in London. And the High Court in London ruled against the Spice Girls, and they ruled in favour of Aprilia. And the Spice Girls would have to pay damages and repay Aprilia. And then...
They had a Better Call Saul lawyer.
And then what happened was it was found against the Spice Girls. So the Spice Girls made an appeal. And they lost the appeal in the High Court big time. And the money that they had to pay back to Aprilia more than covered all the cost of the development of the Spice mini scooter. So it actually ended up, didn't cost them anything.
That's
This is a
win-win.
really interesting story, but it also shows you the importance of having a really good lawyer.
Yeah.
Well,
Very well.
That's what I always
Worth
say.
investing.
That's what I always say. That's one of my life philosophies. You better have a good lawyer in your life.
There's no shortcut.
No.
So
It's really interesting.
So,
Wow.
then after that scooter, but that wasn't because I got more projects because they made because of that. But it was just it's an amusing
That
aspect.
was definitely a
So that
plus.
was my introduction to the scooter world with Aprilia, and it gave me the chance then to spend more time down there. And I was staying with I got to know some of the guys down there, and I'd stay at their house during the week, and it was a really full Italian lifestyle in a way. And then they gave me a project called they already had the first RSV Mille, but it wasn't as adventurous as they'd hoped. In terms of aesthetic and the
Aggressive.
design. It was their first large capacity sport bike, and they had this Grand Prix heritage to live up to. They were winning world championships with Max Biaggi, and then Capirossi, and then also Valentino Rossi came there. And what they decided was, look, we need to up the image of our sport bike. but in the meantime, there was a trend for these sport touring motorcycles, and Honda had come with, I think, I don't know, what would it be called? I can't think of the name right now, but there was a Suzuki TL1000 as well.
TLR.
Which had double pipes and was kind of ugly looking. Anyway.
The TLR, yeah, basically.
It was a movement to these, what they call sports touring. And then Ducati had one of their...
and the big
you know,
fat
with the
whale.
pannier and sort of thing.
To be honest, I never paid attention to it, particularly to these models, because then they were sitting like nowhere between. Not a sport bike, not like proper touring, like what is Hayabusa today or what it was back then, or the XX, the Blackbird, you know, the ZZR. I'm okay with these bikes, but I sometimes don't really see the purpose of a 250 kilo bike.
So what? Because the Mila was such a good basis, then what came out of that was, I got the project concept to develop this sport touring 1000cc bike to go in that market, to compete against the Honda and the Suzuki, the Ducati. And what came out of that was called the SL 1000 Falco. And it was essentially it was the RSV Miller without all the sport fairing.
But tuned down a little bit.
The engine was slightly tuned down, but the frame was much more simple. It was to give this optic of, it was actually slightly triangular tubes. And again, that was an aesthetic that I had brought to them. And they found that they could make, I think it was slightly lighter, the frame, which was funny. But it was the same engine, essentially. And what they found was that the performance of this bike was almost as good as the RSV Miller. So it was a kind of strange balance. There were some who said, well, if we put the RSV Miller swing arm, which is full sport swing arm, you know, the test rider said, why do we need the RSV Miller now? This bike is almost as good. It's like without doing anything to it, and it's, you know.
But it didn't look really aggressive, or...
No, it wasn't meant to, though.
Yeah.
It wasn't meant to. Anyway, that was the basis then that gave me, in effect, the passport that, okay, Martin, he's okay with us. Let's give him the next RSV project. So more or less that's how that happened. And this was really interesting because then I was involved in every aspect, like every aspect, the aerodynamic, the construction of the frame, the acoustic, the tuning, the weight, like everything. And I also brought a lot of new thinking for them. Whereas, for example, the normal traditional toolkit for a motorcycle was, whoa, what a toolkit you've got, you know. And I said, but that's senseless. Why you carry all that weight on a sport bike with your little toolkit, you know, that, and why would you want to show that you need lots of tools for your bike? Can we simplify it? One very simple thing was, why have you got all these different nuts and bolts sizes and threads, and that makes no sense. Can we not minimalize the number of tools? Make the bolts and the screws and the Allen key.
Yeah, there are brands today that simply don't understand that, and it's a combination of everything, you know, the quality, cost, development, and just like basic simplicity and limitations. And I was always saying, when I was living in Austria and working for Kiska and on KTM projects, that mindset and nationality is a limiting factor. It's still to this date, they still use the same old, screws and bolts that are just, so outdated. And it's on some bikes, it's hell to work on because of that.
Well, and there's another aspect of that. So when we're talking about the total design, when you have to consider the whole package, and you're starting with almost a clean sheet of paper, and it's really important to try and consider all these. And as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, when we talked about my industrial design background, that I think played quite an important role, because I was looking at or look at projects from the ground up, and not starting just with here's I try and consider all these different aspects.
But I have a question, because in the last years that I've spent in the transportation areas and looking into these designs, is this something that is not taught in these universities anymore, or just designers don't really care? Because I worked with numerous that simply don't care about these points. They don't care about the lines. They don't care about the shapes, and they definitely not care about the bolts, bolt design, or anything surfaces. They just see the bike as the whole thing, as a unit, and the little bits and pieces that are very important for the rider, it doesn't exist for them.
No.
So they go into meetings and they either don't say anything because they don't know, they have zero knowledge about riding, they don't ride, and this was also a very limiting factor. And I was, kind of sad when I entered the industry, and when I felt and I've seen and witnessed that these people, they really don't know what they are talking about. For them everything is fashion over function.
Yeah. And probably quite shocked too.
Yes, and it simply doesn't work, and then I was coming from a point always trying to, give solutions and support things, and it was like explaining to 6-year-olds, like, no, it has to be here because your foot peg comes here and your leg and the position and the tendons, and they didn't get it. And
they've never even thought of it.
No, absolutely
But that
not. Like the angle and.
But that footrest has got a lovely pattern. It's lovely how they made it.
Yes. And the RSV, when I first sat on that bike, I was amazed. It's a big, bulky bike, aggressive. That was the whole point for me, like super aggressive, and it felt like a jet fighter, to be honest, compared to other from that era.
Well, here's another thing, for example. So in the quest of saving weight, the original RSV, the first model, Mille, as they called it then.
With the big exhaust.
It had a massive exhaust. Now, I don't know if you've ever felt the weight of that thing.
It's literally like you buy the exhaust and you get the bike with it, because the exhaust is like
I mean, they had to
I'll show you pictures.
they had to for the noise regulations. I know that, but the point was, it was so unbelievable heavy. That when there was summer and I went to pick it up. Oh, damn! What's that? Right. So one of the things that I tried to do from my initial sketches from the very beginning was to try and make, okay, if they're going to have or at that time, if it's a one-side exhaust, I don't have it here, but I had all these different ideas and how to instead of just having a tube or the big thing like that, how can we use that as an aesthetic feature? How can you make this, as it's such a part of the whole bike visually, how do you, or is there a way to make this more aesthetically interesting, for example, somehow? So I had all these different things.
Socially acceptable.
And what you learn from that is that ultimately, it comes down to cost.
It always comes down to
And it
cost.
comes down to, and it was this discussion, and I had with them endlessly about it. Oh, but Martin, we need, and I thought, and I said to them, but we've got all the rest of the bike looks really great, dynamic. It's and you now you start to date it by putting on, like, you know, two tubes on the back. Why? Like, this is Italy, man. You're meant to be stylish.
Yeah, yeah.
But Martin, the cost of, but what's the cost? I thought, like, but what's the cost you're paying by making it look old? I've just designed a really amazing looking bike and you want to make it look like it's 5 years older. Why? So this is another little conflict. Anyway, what I was going to say to you was, in the design of this RSV, there's a lot of hidden things that people hadn't realized. And one was from the acoustic. They have to pass these noise tests. And what I realized was, or suggested, well, the frame, it's resonating and it's like a drum when it's just the section that they had. Is there a way that we can do something with the surfaces of the frame to reduce that hollow extra noise? So that, can we reduce the overall noise of the bike, irrespective of the exhaust, but can we get the noise that the bike generates? Because it's loud, you can't believe it. If the noise of the chain starts as it's going through, and it's like what we say a trommel effect, you get this resonating through, and it makes the whole machine sound louder. So is there a way to do that? So we looked at putting some shapes that went internally on the aluminium frame, like pressed, and then actually I think there's also some there might even be in parts some rubber that's put on the inside to reduce this resonance and to reduce this drum effect. That meant then you should be able to reduce the size, the volume of the exhaust. Because you've reduced the main noise of, it's not all to do when a bike goes past the test of the microphone, it's not all to do with exhaust noise. It's the noise that the bike makes, right? And a lot hadn't understood that there's this additional aspect that you should think about. So anyway, that allowed them then to go away from the big, extra big silencer. And would have allowed it to have something that I'd imagined, some really stylish new exhaust silencer. But then came in the cost, and it ends up 2 pipes, left and right side. And for me, that was almost like a little bit, you know, in the side, because I had to really suck on that to it wasn't my wish, okay? And then another thing I wanted to say was very important, aerodynamic. Aprilia had also a fantastic test rider. He was known as Caio, or is known as Caio, Caio Pellisin. Caio, if he sat on the design model or on any of the bikes, and I checked this 2 or 3 times, and within 1 millimeter, he knew the difference of where the lever was. Within 1 millimeter. Now, you've got to understand somebody's finesse. And when you've got a test rider like that, you can't discuss with them. Do you know what I mean? Because they sit and they know instinctively. You imagine that, within 1 millimeter. Where you've got the brake lever or the clutch lever. It's not so simple.
No, I must say I haven't worked with many talented, precision riders, yes, like Marco Belli, because later, the first time I met him, it was when we met in Di Traverso and Flight Track. And then later, we started working in Yamaha because we were using him as a precision rider. Fantastic guy, fantastic, knowledgeable person and rider that knows and feels the motorbikes like inside out. And it's very easy to work with precision riders like that. but sometimes we would have different ones because it depended on the availability, and some were a hell to work on. You couldn't really explain to them that for like a photo shooting, for example, it's very important to have a completely different body position. And then I thought, okay, I mean, if I can't explain to you some basic, simple things, I have no idea how you're developing racing bikes. You know, if you can't listen to what I say. Of course, Italians, but so lost in translation again. Yeah, that was a very, very painful point sometimes.
Right.
But Jeremy McWilliams, for example, a very talented person as well.
Still is.
Yes, still is. Yeah. Remarkable guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your favorite? What's the bike you're most proud of? The design that.
The next one.
Good answer. That's a good answer.
Would you? Yeah. What do you think about the industry today when you see all these, let's say, for example, Ducati that looks like all the CBR, that looks like a CBR?
Oh, no. You know I'm a CBR fan.
Oh, well, yeah.
I think they've just increased their sales.
It could be, yeah.
No, but seriously, you've got to say disappointment overall. Overall disappointing.
In general, yeah.
And for example, it's always been the case that the racing influences the road machines, okay? Now we've got all this aero on the MotoGP bikes. And is there not, with all the knowledge and tech, a way to make a machine look unbelievable without putting this thing across the front and these little things at the back, which, let's be honest, even the Formula 1 cars, they had them since the 60s.
Yeah.
68. I was at Brands Hatch in 1968. They had a wing at the front, two little wings at the bottom. And what's happened today? We've got so much knowledge. They've got so much tech. Why are they just putting... Surely there's a more clever way of putting the air through a bike. There has to be. Surely.
My question is it really
necessary?
Is it necessary? Is it really necessary with all the electronics?
Are the electronics necessary?
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's a good point. I mean, we could.
Are they?
We could do a completely different.
Yeah, you could have a whole
episode on that.
We could talk that for a week.
Yes.
But it comes down to 3 words. No, they're not.
Yeah, to me, I'm not a fan. I never was. I worked on a spectrum of bikes from product management. I had to work on electronics heavily, and I was involved in all that crap. But I never liked it. And for example, like 2 bikes that are in the garage. One is the RC8 from 2008, completely mechanical. This is like mechanical symphony.
Yeah.
There is no traction control, any assistance, absolutely nothing. No ABS, zero. Like 150 horsepower of pure mechanical bike. And then the Super Duke. Wheel control, anti-this, anti-that, MTC, front ABS, double channel rear, blah. I have to switch off all these things because I learned how to ride on proper bikes without electronics, like 1000cc bikes. And I really don't feel confident, and I also don't trust all these electronics. In cars, the same. Like going if I go to the track with my gun, it's same thing. Everything off, and then I know what I can do. But with all of that, I don't know. I'm not.
But I think this is the issue. This is the issue, I think, for young riders coming through in MotoGP, for example. I think there is a point where you've got to start to put your trust onto electronic. Your trust in your life, then. You put in all, it's like the speeds that these guys are doing, and you don't even need to be going that spectacularly fast to really badly hurt yourself or die. And I think this is the aspect with the electronic that is a bit hidden. You have to, I think, because I haven't as well, I can't pretend I'm an expert on that, but I imagine to put your trust over, it's a little bit like, I did a lot of racing. It was very hard for me to go in a car that is prepared by somebody else. It was when I did it all myself, I know, or oversee it, then I know what I'm working with. And I know that if there's a problem, it's either down to me or it was going to happen. But where it was very hard to, I couldn't just let somebody else do that. I think it's perhaps on a higher level it's different when you come to that point where these technicians are so unbelievable good.
Yeah.
But I see the electronic is a little bit in this direction today. You have to really say, okay, the bike actually knows what corner's coming up next and what revs you should have and how much wheel spin you should get and which gear it will be in. Might even knows more than the rider.
Yeah.
Do you know? Now, is that riding, or is that just, you get on the back of something and off you go, and it's like a fairground ride.
When I
You don't know where you're going.
Yeah.
When we were as kids starting to ride, we were always told by our local heroes that we have to learn how to ride the bike, not that the bike rides us.
You, yeah.
Exactly. And today, it's literally what I have seen from my experience. Many people are being ridden by the bike.
I think
the bike
so.
is riding them.
Yeah.
Because of all of that. It's literally, I will always say, it took all the passion, all the essence out of the motorsport in a way.
But the other thing is, do you want to sit? You get on your bike, you're going to go off for your ride. Do you want to sit and have 20, 30 minutes? I need that, I don't need that. How's the weather? I need that.
To be honest, I've never used any of these gimmicks.
And you want that?
Yeah. There's just too many things happening.
Let's have a coffee.
Coffee break.
Forget the cafe bar. Forget the Piazza bar Central. Let's just have a coffee here.
Yeah.
What's the point of the bike
All the
then?
fun is.
I think so. And then, as you said earlier, do you need all that stuff for a normal, let's say the normal average or everyday riders? Do we need that?
In Kiska, I worked with one very, very talented human-machine interface designer, Daniel Handler, and we agreed on one thing. He was a very, very knowledgeable guy about the area of electronics and the interfaces, how everything comes alive. But we agreed that it's not necessary because we conducted so many researches, and during riding, like old-fashioned riders, like me or you or someone, we didn't even pay attention to that. We were paying attention to 3-4 factors, like the coolant, the time, the benzene. That was it, not all these things. Because like if you're not in professional racing, I'm not quite sure why you need all that things. Like, keep it simple, keep it analog.
Keep it simple,
Keep it simple. Exactly. Like if it if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Anyway,
I have a
sorry. Just to finish on the RSV, what was great as you brought me onto that subject, and I have to just spill it out. It was a great bike, and it was a great moment for me in my career, actually. I was taken to the press launch, and I thought, I've really arrived now. I'm there as the designer of that bike at the press launch, world press launch of Aprilia, and at Mugello.
We have some nice designs.
At the best track in the world, probably, and I get to ride my bike that I've designed with that presentation, the global all the main dealer people from around the world were there. The main journalists from around the world were there. And
you felt like...
And I felt, wow, this is, I've achieved something with that, something very special.
Yeah.
The fact that I crashed the bike...
Such a great segue. Anyhow.
The fact that I crashed the bike, but I did have almost a whole day on it before I crashed.
That was like the complete thing, from...
But even that worked out well, because the journalists wrote, here's this designer, Mr. Martina Longmorea, and he's designed an amazing bike. Not only has he designed it, ridden it, but he crash tests them too.
Yeah. And it's a great headline, right?
Now later, I'll just finish this. Later, in the book of Ivanu Beđir, he actually writes about this. He actually discusses this in his biography. And he said, what they hadn't anticipated was that the designer might kill himself. And so they wouldn't let me back out on the bike. He said it wouldn't have looked good for Aprilia that the top designer kills himself on their bike.
Oh, man.
No, I never knew that. I never knew that until I read
funny.
it in the book. Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. And it also was an aspect I hadn't actually considered. And I thought, you know what, that is an important aspect for a company. When it's also serious at that level where it's serious, you don't think about that. All I wanted to do was get on and do a few laps of Mugello,
Wow, but that's I was always testing them, always riding them, and during my era in the industry, every Friday, literally every Friday, I would jump on a different bike, either a prototyper or we had ORB bikes, own requirement bikes, and I would go from Salzburg to Zagreb, and back, or somewhere in Europe. And when these bikes arrived here, everyone was riding them, and we would test the shit out of them, literally, And then I was able to write a very good, accurate report, And then later, it's a funny story because we had like a little booklets. And we always had to note down where are we going, how many kilometers we put on, and who was riding the bikes when we arrived back to Austria, to Mattighofen, And I was always putting like HR, K, like K, Kiska, HR, Kiska. And then people were like, one of the chief officers, he was like, who is riding to Croatia all the time, like putting so many, because this was literally like 1,000 kilometers in a weekend,
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's Anna Maria. But what? We are supposed to ride these bikes for 200 kilometers, not 2,000, That was funny. But I didn't know. No one told me, But my reports were always very good.
I believe it. Very thorough.
Detailed.
How well does it crash, Anna Maria?
Yeah. I didn't. I only crashed once. Yeah.
What do you mean?
But
your leg looks a bit stiff today.
Yeah,
I can't bend it at the moment.
It's part of the job.
And so they were only happy that, again, I hadn't actually hurt myself. I had a stiff leg, but it was a good lesson as well. Don't exceed.
I didn't crash them so often or many of them, but I was always bringing bits and pieces with me because there would be always something that would break. And but I was collecting fines. I was known to collect fines. Yeah, it was either me or Gerald Kiska who would get the fine, and people immediately knew who it was.
Of course.
Troublemaker.
Yeah, the crocologist.
The crocologist.
Yeah, good words.
What can you tell us about the design for the Alien? Because this is the car that when I saw it, when I studied you to do some research for this episode, I was like, wow, what is this? I have to know. So can you tell us how did it came about? How did the Alien became Alien?
It's actually it's this one.
Oh, here, yeah. Oh, yeah.
how it came about, which was presented in Turin. And it was a massive event, because that was the pinnacle of car design presentation show. All the best designs and everything. The competition, normally it was just the Italian design groups, Pininfarina, Bertoni, Ital Design, and several of the other, Michelotti. There was a few, and they always had this, historically, this used this event to present their new design concepts. And they all worked for other companies, like Pininfarina were working for Ferrari. Ital was working with Volkswagen and Lamborghini. Bertoni was Lamborghini. They all would present. It was like a fashion show. This was like the equivalent of the catwalk of the new season's designs. And the company that I worked for at that time, that I'd come to after Ford, was called International Automotive Design, IAD. And they were relatively small and relatively unknown, and wanted to increase their exposure and put their name on the global design arena, let's say. And they tried the year previously with a car from the chief design at that time, and unfortunately the design wasn't very good. That was one thing. They hadn't understood the importance of really pushing the boundaries of design. They hadn't understood that this is what the Italians were doing. That's why everybody went to them because they were creating style, innovation, and that's quite different. So anyway, within IED there was 4 or 5 of us designers, and we were just given the open brief, design a concept car, and that was what I created. I had actually this idea some time before. I'd sketched it out just as rough sketches, but then having an official project to create a new concept car, I used that idea that I'd had, or kept. I kept it quietly under here. This will be good one day, and I took it out and started to develop that. You can probably see on some of this when I say the development. So, for example, to understand the whole form, and then what was going to happen with the chassis and the interior. I conceived the whole, and I did. I conceived the complete vehicle, so it was all integral, all one. And when it was made, it was first of all a brave move from IAD, because it was very radical, as you can see. There wasn't anything else like it. And I have to say that the owner of IAD, Mr. John Shute, who was the owner of it, he really put his trust and faith in me for that work, for which I've always been very grateful that he really trusted me on that. And this what's interesting with this project is it sort of became one of these projects that started, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just had a momentum of its own. So after came through the presentation of the sketches, and here's an example. The night before we were going to present, and all the designers had to present their work, and everybody had made some nice sketches of different cars, but mine was the most, I have to say, most outstanding. But even then, I didn't fully realize how outstanding it was. And so the night before I made a full-size, I stayed up all night and I made a full-size painting, what they call tape drawing, because I felt that I have to get this across. It was just something in me, I just have to get this across. It's so different, but I know the size, I know the proportion, I know exactly how it's going to be, how they can work it out. I have all that. And I stayed up all night, and I made that, I don't know if it's even in here, but I made the full-size tape drawing. I've got it somewhere else. And that was also an amazing learning experience for me, because I was on my own, tapes, didn't have any of the rest of the design people around. You could be fully concentrated, and I think I might have had a couple of sandwiches or something, but I just stayed right through the night until I'd done it. And in the morning, when everybody else came in, you know, and I'm just sitting on my desk still going like, and then, hey Martin, have you not been home? Well, no. What are you doing? Have a look over there. I'm like, bloody hell, you know, what's that? But for me, that was
my reaction when I saw it.
But also for me, then I knew absolutely this not just the scale sketches, not just these sketches. I just knew this is going to work full size, and it's going to be great. And I won the you know, the internal competition, as it were, or my design was selected, and then the team was assembled to take it through, and it was a very, I say, relatively short time that we had to do it, to go from the presentation of the sketch to the building a clay model, fiberglass model, having that, it had a special opening because both doors and the roof opened all at the same time. You just can't leave it up. And that had to be worked out with an engineer. So there was you'll see the guys here, this was the team, that was the group there back then in the day. And there's another interesting aspect for the scale model that was sculpted. It was sculpted by a guy that became a very close friend of mine through us working together with that. And he was a clay modeler. And I had then gone at Christmas time, as they were making that, to take the holiday with my family. And Simon sculpted that only from my sketches. And it was exactly like I envisaged. So this shows, for me at that time, it showed me the importance of working with people that you have really got a close empathy with, and
that understands.
a type of understanding that you don't need to be there all the time, but they know.
Yeah.
And you know.
I had a similar story from Kiska with a very young and a very inspiring designer, Anton Rousseau. I did not always agree with him on the designs, and he worked on some very weird designs, which I would not, let's say, approve or liked. And then later, when he was leaving Kiska, he wrote me like a little note that I helped him, because I was always constructive, and I gave him very honest and open feedback on everything, and that meant a lot to him. And we would always agree in the end, whether I liked it or not. But it was like a very empathetic, cooperation relationship that we had. And that's the most important thing to have with people, that you work on these things.
Yeah. Well, anyway, as I said, and that project kind of got its own momentum. So it just flowed. I can't explain it any other way. It just flowed. The design was great. The guys that came for example, to do this press article, blown away. You asked me about where were these photographs taken. This was just on a disused quarry. That's where they just nearby, and they put it in the back of a truck and took it up there. And it was all top secret because they didn't need that anybody got to see it before it was put to Turin. But that's why this is not quite the finished vehicle, because these are taken. I think it was about two weeks or 3 weeks before
it was finished.
Right, but in time for the magazine, that it was coordinated that this was a monthly magazine. When that magazine came out, it just happened that was going to be the day before or the day of the show in Turin. So it was all to be coordinated, and it got its own momentum, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And when it came at the show, again, I said to you about with the motorcycle of Aprilia, the press launch there. This is probably a moment again for me that was so emotional and such a confirmation. I know what I can do. It's like a validation. When we took the cover from the car, and I was one of the people that took the cover from the car in Turin. It was unbelievable, the reaction. Everybody just started running to look at this car. And they were all standing, clapping. And this Giugiaro, the head designer of, well, it was his company, Ital Design. When the crowd had sort of dispersed, the initial presentation, and it's gone a little bit quieter, I noticed that he came with his entourage. It's like the Pope that would walk. Mr. Giugiaro came along, and he has his entourage, and they're all going, yes, Giorgio, yes. And he stood in front, and he just went, and he really looked at it, and it revolved round. It was on a rotating table. It revolved around one time. He just looked at it like that, then turned and walked away. And I watched that, and I thought, I can't believe it. This is the guy that I revere. This is one of the companies, and I met him in 1979 when I took that trip to Italy that we talked about, where I won the money for the Royal Society bursary award.
Oh, wow.
And that was I thought, now it's funny, the last time I met him, I'd come to his studio as a, please may I shake your hand? And then there I was back in his home city.
And now he's admiring
and
your
he's
work.
standing looking at that car.
And being inspired by you now.
I hope.
I'm sure he is.
Anyway, I don't know. But it was just, that's, as I said earlier, this is what you don't know with life, the paths it takes. And on the other hand, if you think about, is there a connection? Well, you've laid the foundation in a way. You've kind of, you're putting yourself in these ways, you know? It's like, as I've come here now, in 2008 or 9, we just made a visit down to Makarska, and then I made actually an interview in Zagreb for wait, I think of the name, follow focus for a camera called the Canon 5D. And we filmed it in Zagreb in 2009. And it's so funny now I'm back here again, all these years later.
Universe works in mysterious ways.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, I always say that, yeah.
And you can't plan for things like that. It's just that there's a path.
Yeah.
And it's maybe that sometimes you don't realize it at that moment until you have a little time and you think back, it's gone like this. Now, is that the universe? Is it like a predestiny? What is that? I don't know. I don't know. can't explain it, but there's some things and you just feel, well, it's got its way.
Yeah, and you also laid the foundations, and you didn't even know it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, okay.
This leads me to two questions. One question is why, I mean, I know the answer, why do some companies do some concepts? Because they just want to showcase, they want to make a statement. And these are the models that never see the light of the day in the end. But sometimes I wonder why. What's the whole statement about? If you're going to showcase all the technology, all the different shapes you can do, why does it never hit production?
So what you're saying is that, for example, they've presented a car, as they call it, a concept car.
Exactly. Why
And it's really appreciated and everyone loves it, and then
that's it.
what happens
It
to it?
stays a concept or a prototype.
Or it comes out with that name, but it's nothing like
Yeah.
what was presented.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you say, well, why? What happened? I also, as designer, you think, well, what are you doing? You know, like Renault are very good at that. Produce wonderful concept, and then you never saw it again. And why you didn't see it again? Because basically they couldn't make it. And they didn't, all they were doing was just type of, as you say, showcasing that aspect, but fundamentally, they didn't have a business model for that vehicle then, it seems. Now I think they're trying to do it a slightly different way. You have this new electric
Movement.
Renault 5,
Oh, okay.
Renault 5, and a Renault 4 that's got nothing whatsoever to do with the original Renault 4. Renault 5 that they've produced, the electric one, it's no different, it's the same, it's good enough. The only thing is, it's called Renault 5, but it's not a Renault 5, you know? So they just try to latch on to these names as a way of they massage the public, everyone that's buying that vehicle, they type of massage them, and they start believing it because maybe they never knew an original Renault 5. They maybe never seen one in their lives.
I would say the people that work on these projects today potentially maybe never saw the model in person.
Yeah.
And probably never even driven it. So, I mean, I've seen it. I was astonished that people who are designing bikes have never even ridden, for example, KTM, like Super Dukes. You're designing a Super Duke or a RC390 or 790, and you have never taken this bike home.
It's a cool sketch, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I tried once.
Looks
it ended
great
up
on
like
the
with a
wall of the
unicorn,
studio.
Yeah.
Well, how does it look in your garage? How is it going to be like when you've got to change the oil? Can you get the filter off? What?
Probably not. Fashion or function again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You tried changing the wheel. How many things have you got to take off before you can get the wheel out?
Exactly. Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah, that always comes to understanding and
You know?
not knowing. So
No.
I was so disappointed. I can't say angry or mad or pissed, but just I was disappointed because I was feeling like I am explaining to a wall, you know, and no one was really listening to me but every story has two sides. This had the same. They would never get the bikes to test, which is really a shame. But then again, to this date, I will never understand why.
But
why
if
it
they
works like
can't
that.
ride and there's a danger they might crash and die,
Well, yeah. Yes.
it wouldn't look good, would it?
No, it wouldn't. No. But there were.
I'm the living proof.
You look great.
People that we aspire to. Did you had or have a role model when you started designing? Was there a
Yes.
person, agency, someone that you looked up to?
Yes. And
Tell us.
he was called, or is, yeah, no, it was now actually, Marcello Gandini. And Marcello Gandini was the guy that I felt he was interesting because he was a bit under the radar. He wasn't somebody that was standing up, shouting about what he does or did. And yet his designs were so futuristic and so different and so ahead of the time and so innovative. And then also unmistakable. Like you couldn't mistake his cars for any other. There's a couple, actually more, here behind me.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like walking into heaven.
That's why we are here.
And he had that effect. It was something that, as a designer, I wanted to aspire to. And I was fortunate enough to get the chance to meet him through this show at Turin. And I actually was able to go to his home. It was very unusual. He normally didn't accept visits. This was explained to me for one. He was quite shy is maybe the wrong word. A little bit introverted, perhaps.
Nice to say.
But he accepted that I could visit. And actually, I took him a copy of that magazine that had that whole thing. Because one of the things that had inspired me with that was a car called the Lancia Stratos. And I had in my head a picture of this Lancia that was rallied and it had crashed on one of the rallies in Britain. And the rear part had flown away. But the car had kept continuing in the rally, and they had photographs of it. And this gave me the aesthetic concept of the front part that was very aerodynamic and the rear part that was meant to use really visibly. You see that is the power pack.
Almost looks like the praying mantis.
and that's actually fundamentally, and I explained that to him when I met him. I said, you know, great admirer of all your things, and this was put through a translator. I think he actually understood his English very well, but I took a young lady that was a translator, and went to, in fact, it was also an interesting story because this was very Italian, Italian style. Martin, Mr. Gandini lives here. You are to drive, how many? It was 25 or 30 kilometers here to that village. Park at that lay-by, or park at that parking place and wait. Be there around whatever time it was, I can't remember, 10 o'clock in the morning or something, you know. On the outskirts of, on the foothills of the mountains around Turin, you know, some village there. Okay, so go, get there, there's just this road and then there's like just mountains and trees and here's there's a parking place and just pull up and park there. There was nobody there. And just sat and waited with the lady that was the translator.
Someone will
And it was
come.
really
Sounds
foggy.
sketchy.
It was really foggy as well. It was all really
Eventually.
sketchy. You know, it was all like, what's going on here? Anyway, then through the sort of a little bit of the morning fog in the foothills of the mountains, this little blue Renault comes out, goes past, and then I thought, that's funny. Oh, okay. Because I first thought, well, that must be him, you know. And then it comes back and pulls in and stops. And the guy goes, so, just like to the woman, just follow me. So then we followed him off up to his house, which was also very old. And in fact, he told me it had been a type of monastery at some point, and had a courtyard inside. It was all a square with a little doorway that you went through, and there was a courtyard inside. And he was in the middle of, in the process of also renovating it So it was by far, it wasn't finished or anything like that. It was all work in progress. But he had one room that he took me into. First we went in, had a coffee and exchanged our nice greetings and thank you and some small talk and the magazine. And then he sort of felt like he could take me around, and then he took me around for a little walk through his property. And then to this room where it was clearly his design studio room.
Where the magic happens.
But I'll tell you what I was looking for. I was looking for Lamborghinis. Lamborghini Muras, Lamborghini Countach, Lancia Stratos. You know, I was looking for, where are all these supercars? Where's he got them? And then I said to him, or through the translator, you know, Mr. Gandini,
it's all nice and great, but
we're the Lambos, buddy.
yeah.
Where's the good
Dude,
stuff? Where's the good stuff?
where's my Lambo?
And what did he say?
And he said, he doesn't really bother with that.
What?
He doesn't really bother. He
fair
doesn't
enough.
collect his own cars, you know.
Okay.
It was almost like he does a project.
Oh, that's it.
Oh, yeah. But the little Renault 5, it's the second one, yeah. So and it's the one that he designed.
Yeah. The 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember which one. It's not the first one or the second, but it was the one after that. Maybe it's the Mark III or sort of very slabby.
The most important question of today: who designed the Twingo?
The Twingo? No. Wait till I think about that. Who's actually the designer of the Twingo? I don't know. I know who the chief designer was of that program at that time. But off the top of my head, I can't think of who the designer is. Do you know?
No. Shame on me.
We could probably find out.
You're the biggest embassy for Twingo.
Yeah.
That's all I see on your feed.
Yes.
Well, that can be a project unearth because sometimes the designs of the cars, it's very interesting, the origination, where they've come out from, which designer. The original Renault 5 was designed by a young man that then passed away quite before it was produced. I don't know if you knew that.
No.
But they kept it how he'd envisaged it and how he designed it.
I do know the whole story about the Twingo, how they wanted to create this little like a cute car for town, and how it came about. But then it changed. The design was completely different, and it turned much better than it was in the beginning.
It has this very distinctive face.
Happy face.
Yeah.
Twingo's always happy.
I must tell you, one of my friends, who was the chief designer of Ducatis, 999. Mike Hillwood replica, the
999.
Super Motard. What else? What's the first sort of off-road touring?
Multistrada.
Hypermotor. Yeah, something like that. Anyway, he's the designer, the brains behind those. Okay, and he had and lived more or less lived in his Renault Twingo with his dash hand. People.
It's like a king's
He loved
size
it.
bed in Twingo. It's like when you sit in the back and you move the the bench to the seats all the way to the back. It's like I'm the emperor here, you know. It's funny.
No, amazing, great. So he's a really big fan of that car. Yeah.
Important one is when something is working in terms of design. Let's say Twingo, for example, super cute, little cute dash, very nice, distinctive, the locks, you know.
Right.
Why change it? Why do you change it? I understand the story, I understand the background, the facelifts, but why is it often the case that you have something very nice looking, functional, and then it gets messed up with every single facelift? I also understand factors like the cost, and so on. Designers changing, management changing, but why is it always the case that it gets worse as it ages?
Yeah, it's a good question. Long story short, BMW buys, or Mini's in amongst the companies that BMW buy. What do they make? They make a car that looks like the old Mini. And it's immediately successful. So you have to think, now what was wrong with British management? That they didn't understand what they've got and just make that continue. Even if it has now, it's not a Mini as I know a Mini. Today's Minis, they're not. Right? I understand why they've done what they do, because it's underneath it's a BMW, and they just massage the shape, essentially, to fit the BMW underneath, because that's what it is, essentially, right? That's why they didn't shrink the BMW, they made the Mini bigger, okay? But why, but what I'm saying is that the first step was they essentially recreated the Mini. Same language, essentially, the form, all the things that you recognize as what made a Mini a Mini. Now, what was wrong with British management that they couldn't do that? That's a case of where they've had exactly what you've described. They've got the winning formula, and they didn't even see it, and they give it up. They give it up, and then the next one comes along. It's quite happy. I'm going to have some of that.
I would say there are many factors. From my experience when I was in Kiska and when I was working on KTM projects, there were some fundamentally good bikes, but a bike is not enough to sell itself.
No.
There is the customer experience, you know, the target groups, the people, how you treat people in the dealerships. I mean, the whole customer experience, the brand promise. If you have rude people, if the first approach is rude and unfriendly, I'm not sure how that will end up in the end.
Also, the products have to be aesthetically appealing.
Exactly, and it has to work. The price has to be met. I remember I was going from dealer to dealer in general, you know, when I had these marketing bikes, and I would end up being, you know, the Aprilia dealers or multi-dealers that had many other bikes together, or Ducati. The best experiences I always had in BMW Motorrad dealerships and Ducatis, and Harley Davidson, because my first experience comes from a Harley Davidson in Croatia. It's a dealer, so for us was it very important. Whoever comes inside, they have to be offered coffee, water, a little donut, some snacks, something, you know, because this is where you build trust. KTM, for example, you enter the dealership, no one even says hi in Austria. I don't know if it's worldwide, but now with the whole brand sinking, I would say it is, you know.
I think if you walked into, they'd be hiding.
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Yeah. Like the Austrian mentality.
You don't want one of those, do you?
We have money, we are rich enough, leave. Yeah, so this was funny. But the brand experience is very, very important. Not many brands understand that.
No.
So maybe it was a combination of many factors at that time. I've seen many models that were, like I said, fundamentally good, but nothing happened because the model itself was not enough to be successful. So
I mean, it's an interesting point, just to touch on that, because as you know, in the last days, KTM are announcing horrendous losses.
Yeah.
How can that be? Is it that the bikes aren't good looking enough? Are they too
this is because
expensive?
I left Kiska in 2019.
Everything went.
What happened? It's since Anna-Marie is no longer there.
They lost in Dakar in 19, you know?
Come to a point where it's really, I'm working to a formula that works.
You're growing.
And why should I? It works.
Yeah, where's the challenge? Where's the,
That works.
yeah.
right? And maybe this is just a thing about me. When I started out at Ford, you asked me earlier, I started out, and when I first walked into the, during the holiday time from the Royal College, you got the time to go into Ford studio. And I can remember the first time I went in there, it just blew me away completely. And I thought, that's it, I'm a designer now.
Yeah.
I'm a car designer.
Bigger spoiler.
Right? I'm here. Wow.
Right. Yeah.
So, and the first holiday time, amazing. Everything's like, whoa, and it's professional, full-size tape. The American designers that would be visiting there, because they would be in exchange from Detroit, they could do tape drawings, full-size tape drawings, airbrush renderings on the wall in a three-piece suit. You know, suit, tie, cravat, nice shiny shoes. They were so stylish.
Italian.
No, it's different. It was that Americans. Like, they were so stiff. And I used to think, how on earth can you paint something dressed like you've just come from a meeting at the bank or something? You know, it's like,
So sterilized. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
and they do these amazing, huge, full-size renderings, right? Okay, that was impressive. Anyway, what I was leading to, so the first, wow, then the next one, wow. Next time, it's funny that these guys always park their cars in the same place, in the car park. They eat the same things every day.
The routine.
They talk about the same things that they were talking about when I first visited here a year ago. Jeez.
Today, mental coaches would call it discipline.
These guys are, and these guys are so talented. And then I started to see it's static.
They stayed in the comfort zone.
They've sort of become. That's it exactly. That's a very good. That's a very good analogy. They stayed in their comfort zone. And what I felt is I want to be creative, and I want to be innovative, and I need to find ways to do that. Can't be like that. It can't be like that. And I started to feel inside, oh no, what have I done? I've agreed to go to work for Ford. Oh no. Oh, what have I done? You know, these must be okay when you get there to work. Must be different. And it wasn't. And it wasn't. And that's when I began to think, damn, you know, I know these boys I know these guys are really talented and they are good at what they're doing, but they haven't changed in the 2 years that I've been visiting, because I was only visiting, not there as full time, when I was just in the holiday experience. What's going on? Is this all it is? And it's exactly like you said, that comfort. They've got very comfortable. Okay, you can argue these are guys, they've got their families, they've got, you know, they need to stay safe, they need to bring in
security,
and all of that is completely understandable. But how do you distinguish yourself then as a designer, innovative designer? And honestly, I suppose without knowing it at the time, really, I just felt I have to be a bit different here. This isn't going to be enough for me. And I don't want to sound like but this wasn't going to be enough for me.
And you also, when you started designing cars, then you switched to motorbikes as well. I mean, that was.
I did, but here's the thing again. You just made me think of something else with the Ford. I mean, you're very good at that.
Oh, thank you.
He comes up with, just throws something in and it triggers me. When I was at Ford, one of the newspaper articles was in the Financial Times, and I used to get the Financial Times at weekends because it was the most interesting read. not for the financial bit, but they had a supplement, and it was all about all different aspects of what's going on in Britain or fashion. It was all sorts of other things. And there was an article about Mr. John Shute of IAD, International Automotive Design. And for some reason, I cut out that piece from the paper, and it was this man here, this gentleman here. It's a very Caravaggio-like photograph, but it's fantastic. Mr. John Shute. And he was standing holding a model above his head, the car model, by the way, above his head, and it was International Automotive Design, the man that's looking to change the world, or some sort of slightly prominent headline. And I cut that out, that article in the paper. I probably still have it somewhere, in amongst my stuff somewhere. But I kept that. There came a point at Ford, and it wasn't long after I'd started working there, and I was up to here with it. And there was a couple of managers that were really nasty, devious people, right? And they would abuse, they basically abused their position, I felt. I was a young guy, you know? You should make some allowances, I think. And I was one of the few that would drive from like the other side of London all the way through to get down to Dunton, which was right out in Essex. And it was a good hour's drive, right? One way. When the traffic was good. If you got the bad traffic, especially on a Friday night, that was it. You know, you didn't get back till maybe 6, 7 o'clock at night. This guy, I'm not going to say his name, although I could.
You have the power.
He was one of the managers there. And invariably on a Friday at 3:30, 4 o'clock, I would get a little message or a note. I'd like to just have a chat before you leave this evening. Can you be like 4:30? So what the fuck? I've got to be out. If I don't get out here at 4:45, I'm stuffed, you know. I'm not going to get home in time to see the kids or, you know what I mean? And he really played that. And it would be some little blah, 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 blah. And all it was what we call in English pulling rank. Do you understand that expression?
Yeah.
He was the sergeant. You know, he was pulling rank. He was a bit higher up the ladder.
Oh, so he was using the...
And he'd never be there. He'd never be there. I'd have to hang around then. Because I was young and I didn't want to make the wrong impression, you know. And, but that was a total abuse of his power, his situation. So there was going to come a point where it wasn't going to work very well anymore. That type of attitude, those type of things happening, and I think looking back, I made the right decision. It wasn't forced on me, but it was a thing where, you know what, Martin, maybe it's not working here, and I'm going, you know what, it definitely is not.
Yeah, no. Your body literally tells you when it's time to leave.
It was a massive gamble and a massive step for me with a new young family to jump out of the comfort zone without a parachute.
It must be scary as well,
It was, and at the time I did it, I thought, I don't know where this is going now. I really don't.
Just put in fifth gear and go.
What's going to happen? And sorry, just to finish on that. And then I remembered this article about this guy, John Shute. And I called him up. I just called the company up and spoke to him. And he said, come down next week.
Is the solution.
Okay.
Exactly.
Like, wow.
No, and I did. I did. And he said, you know, after a quick exchange, and he just said, how much do you earn at Ford? And I said, I think it's £6,500. That's for the year, I'll give you 7,000 and you can start next week. I was like, oh, geez.
Really exciting.
Well, no, I was like, huh?
Yeah.
I was really, oh, I need to think about, like, can I think about that? Yeah, of course. And then he called me up a week later. Have you made up your mind? And I thought, you know what, I can't, this is too good to let go in a way.
Yeah, it feels unreal in a way.
It might go away.
Yeah.
I better just, you know, and I did.
Take it, yeah.
And then all this continued from that. And going with this company, it opened a whole new avenue, because previously, my understanding of the car design business was, you got a job in the car company like Ford, make your nice design work, get your money, and that's it.
Yeah.
You naturally hope you're going to get great projects, or you don't hope. You're going to have the best projects. You're going to make the best designs. That's how you're thinking. I'd never heard of these consultant companies, consultant design in that sense, especially in Britain, where I could come there, and I was working for him. And then a few weeks after I was there, he called me into the office and said, listen, we've got inquiries from Volvo in Sweden. They're looking for 3 designers for a period. Could we put your name forward? What, Volvo in Sweden? Yes, Volvo in Sweden.
Yes.
Wow. You know.
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Yeah, I think so. A few days just before that, hey, we've got an inquiry from Australia, Ford Australia. Might you be interested to go to Melbourne? Oh,
Down
Melbourne.
Under. Down under.
Yes, mate.
But suddenly this was added a whole new
Chain of reaction.
Yeah. And actually, Melbourne, before that could happen, I was already at an interview in London with a couple of the Volvo design group came over, and they offered me, or let's say a week after that, maybe it was 2 weeks, I'm not sure exactly now, it's a long time ago, but I get the information, well, they'd like to have you, we've booked the ferry.
Everything's taken care of.
You're going to Göteborg. Do you like moose? Do you like cold, dark nights that never end? We booked the ferry for you, you know, across the roughest sea of the world, probably in the winter time. Wow, and that's when I jumped to that, and that introduced me to the world of consultant designer. So perhaps we should have talked about that earlier, but it was such a change for me, and it was a whole new world, just like suddenly opened up. Yeah. And then you start to realize, I met a couple of other guys at Volvo that had been brought over from America, you know. It's not unusual. The funny thing was, they had really talented people, and what were they making? Boxes.
Yeah.
Well,
big
functional
boxes.
Yeah. Durable boxes.
And it didn't matter, they didn't care. Got a nice place, got a nice view out of the window. We watched the Swedish military coming down, landing the Viggens, and they come. It's like something out of Top Gun, you know. Look out the studio, you'd hear them coming. Or even it's the Death Star coming from, you know, Star Wars is coming, Darth's coming in today. And it would be things like that. It's hard to explain, but if you've not experienced it before, you know, and suddenly there was this whole new thing. But again, going back to that, but I never really quite understood with the Volvo from the point of view of they'd established the design cars and the direction, and they weren't really looking to change it. But it made their life a lot easier for some of the other guys there, because they could still go home at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
And the consultant guys were there just doing things, filling out the time, you know. So you've racked up enough hours that you can say, wow, that's been a really great month.
Yeah.
But all of that happened once you decided to let go. And this is
this permanent
exactly.
thing.
This is in general like a very intoxicating, like a prison. It's like an internal struggle.
Right, and
I
the
had
other
the same
thing was,
thing.
I wanted to add to that, is that what worked for me was that gave me like an edge. I couldn't just sit back. I have to, that kept me then, I need to stay creative. I need, you know, I need that.
That push.
And that, you know, I'm not going to sit and vegetate. I'm not going to sit down. And then, as I said, that opened up all these other avenues. So, for example, like the shoes I showed you, the race boots, the bike, the scooter, you know, I started to have an opportunity to be involved in so many aspects that I had not actually
thought of
envisaged or, not even thought of.
Yeah.
It's all just
Opened up all sorts of doors.
and it's amazing, you know.
Wow.
We will have a couple of more episodes because you can't stuff everything in one.
Yeah.
No, you can't. You haven't heard about my racing career,
I
yet,
wanted
have you?
to. I'm holding a piece of history.
You are.
Yeah.
What's the story behind it? I've heard something about Ayrton Senna, and I got a little bit emotional. Well, quite emotional.
Well,
so
Well, these are my race boots that I used when I was racing Formula Ford and Formula 3 in Britain. And I was within a second of Ayrton Senna in the Formula 3 race, supporting race to the British Grand Prix.
wow.
That's a very important one. That's the throttle. It still jumps, look. And these are my old driving race gloves, and they're what they call Nomex. And it was at the time when all the Formula One guys, if you had a pair of these, you were a super styler.
Yeah.
You were going to be, you know, and you pulled them on like this. And they were look, it was Nomex.
Wow.
And that was the how would you call it, with the flame-proof overalls and your fireproof boots and also fireproof underwear. So, but this sort of topped it off. If you ever see Ayrton Senna at Monte Carlo in car, you'll see him. He has the same gloves.
Yeah.
from gear changing. Because in these days we didn't have all the press buttons and do stuff like that. You had to change gear. And so there's some history in these.
You had to do everything what men did back then and today. But anyway. Oh man.
So yeah, that's just a touch of the
history,
old race days.
The question I had for last was if there is somebody, a young girl or a young boy that wants to be a designer. If you have a piece of advice or some encouraging thought that you would give them, what would it be?
You'd have to ask yourself how badly do you want to do it,
And what kind
and
of
are you
impact
prepared
would
to
you
really bleed sometimes to pursue what you want? And in some cases, I don't know if you even need to ask yourself that. You just have to have that want or idea.
Fire in you.
Right. And I can't compare what I started when I did it, because today obviously things are different. But fundamentally, it's got to be something from within yourself that comes out, and that you've got to be prepared to really go after those goals or your dream. And don't aim for here. You'll reach there, no problem. You've got to be aiming for what we call blue sky, And then halfway there is much, much better than just there. So that's all I'd say. Just go after what you want to do. Be prepared to suffer a little bit, but
the reward.
And you will have to make sacrifices, if it's financially or emotionally or energy. You will have to do that. That's part of the story. It's part of the game.
Yeah.
But don't give up. Never give up. I think that's the important one. Never give up. Just keep going.
Giving up was never an option.
No.
Yeah. I always get asked that question, and yeah, this industry we worked in is very different from what it was. But I will always say to anyone, especially to younger people and young people who want to leave Croatia, I have no particular advices about this industry, whether you want to work as a brand coordinator or a product manager or a designer, but just leave. Just leave, do it, because you can always come back. And that's it. It's a very hard and challenging journey, as it was for me, but you can always come back.
That's it, and you don't
Yeah.
know where the road takes
Exactly.
you, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, maybe it's better like that.
Yes.
You do not know what the future holds. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. Yeah.
A very
Thank you
inspiring
so much
story.
for,
Well, thank you very much.
And this is just the beginning.
It's been a great chat, and
It's been a pleasure for
Yeah.
us.
look forward to some more.
To the next one. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm also going to say thank you for our viewers. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and busy day to watch this episode. You can always find us on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, and we cannot wait to see you in the next one. Yes, thank you. Martina Longmorea, once again.
Thank you. Goodbye.